Okay. Thanks, Kim. It's great to be here. I'm Teresa, and this is Milta, by the way. It's great to be here. When Kim was mentioning about member care, I remember that my husband and I think it was 30 years ago now, when they had the first Missionary Kid Conference in Manila, Philippines, my husband and I were chosen by our team because they know our passion to see healthy families and healthy children. And so we were chosen to represent our organization and attend that conference. And that was a launch for a lot of things in the member care world. We attended with our then youngest 4-month-old daughter. And she was the youngest or second youngest participant there. So she played a part as well. But member care is near and dear to our hearts. And maybe just so I don't forget at the end, there are some resources on the table back there. And you can look at those if you want to know where to find those books, or if you want to know where to find other resources. You can certainly ask Milta. She's kind of an expert in that area. And then also Ron Koteski, who has a website. It's called missionarycare.com. And so that's a great resource. He's done, through the years, he's done so many handouts and flyers that you can use for your church or for your missionaries. It's just such a wealth of information. And so it's great that the sharing that goes on in the member care world. Wanted to start off here by, let's see here if I can get this work. There we go. I thought I'd start off with just a simple definition of care, and this one comes to us via Google. And it says, the provision of what is necessary for the health, welfare, maintenance, and protection of someone. And of course, that someone is people who are very near and dear to all of us. But I think the important thing to remember is things can become very complex very quickly in the member care world. But I think the things that we can keep simple, keep those things simple. And the simple things that we can do to care for people, don't forget to do those things. Because sometimes you can't take care of every need that people have. But if you do the things that you can do, and if you refer them to others who can help them with those things that you can't do, and there's such a global network for member care that we together can take good care of our people. I want to also say that as member caregivers, that we will make some mistakes, and our people will make some mistakes. So there needs to be lots of grace and lots of forgiveness. What we want to do in an ideal world is not always what we're able to do. And so I think keeping that perspective. But what we must do is we must use whatever resources we have at our disposal to serve, encourage, support, and advocate for our frontline workers. And above all, our global family must know that we care. And I want to start off with that because I don't want us to get busy at the end and forget. So people need to know that we pray for them and we need to encourage them. And they also, one thing too I always say is they need to know that they're never alone. And we talk about the Lord's presence with them, and that is so dear and so real. But they also need to know that we are with them, that we care for them. Okay, Ryan's got some handouts here, if some of you didn't get. Great. Okay. Now, for our member care team here in the mission, this last year, we kind of looked at, we're in the midst of developing some new things to implement more member care on the field side of things. It's a process for us that we're in the midst of, but we took a step back and said, what are our values? Because for us, everything that we do needs to flow out of our vision and our values. What has God called us to do as an organization? And so you can see from the list here, I won't go through them all. And I should say, if any of you want a copy of our slideshow, we're glad to email it to you later, too. So just,
I think it'll be put online later.
Okay, yeah, that would be great. Yeah, that would be great. That would be great. And so just so you can see what the things are that we took into account. But I think the fourth one there, a holistic view of care, I think that's so important to us at least. Because we know that we can be really good in some areas, but we need to look holistically at our people. We need to know what their needs are, and we need to know how those needs can be met. And another one I would really highlight, and we'll refer to it in a few minutes, is really the connection and communication. Because if people know what to expect, and if they get responses when they have needs, then that will demonstrate to them how much you really care for them. And another one is really the upholding confidentiality. I don't know how it is in your home churches, but working in an organization, I find that sometimes people want to know what's going on, and they have a good heart to want to know what's going on. And yet those of us that carry the burden of knowing what's going on oftentimes think, I wish I didn't have to know the things that I have to know, if you're really dealing with crisis needs on the field. And so make sure for your missionaries that they know that you hold their confidentiality when they really share those deep struggles they're having. Don't let it be something. There's ways to communicate those things, but really show a deep, utmost respect for your people. As we looked at our values then, we went from there and we created an up-to-date purpose statement for member care. And I highlighted a few things there that we felt were really important for us. And we decided that we're going to cultivate a culture of member care. So we want everything that we do to be done in a way that shows that we care about people. When we have to tell them the hard things, they at least know that we care. And when they have a struggle, they know that we care for them. And then we want to address all aspects of a missionary's spiritual, emotional, psychological, physical, financial, relational, and intellectual well-being. It's lots of big words. But like I said, we want to look at it holistically. And we want to seek to empower them then to make healthy choices. Because making healthy choices is important. And when things are tough on the field, when they're going through struggles, it's hard sometimes to make healthy choices. And so the more proactive and preventative that we can be in providing care for them, the better. And then we want to provide the training, resourcing, and equipping throughout their missionary life cycle. You know, sure enough, as you think, okay, we know what this family needs, the next thing you know, they're launching kids off to college, or they have aging parents back home. And so it's ever moving, it's ever changing. And so you need to be up to date with each missionary family and what are their particular needs at the stage of life they're at. And the reason that we do all this is so that they can effectively fulfill God's call. We can care about people and love them a lot, but we have to be doing it with the purpose that what God has called them to do will be accomplished. And I think that's important. Those of us that really are encouragers, that really care about people, that really want to help them and be with them and walk through things with them, we need to keep that perspective, that there's a reason that we're doing it, so that they can be effective in fulfilling God's call. Then I'm going to ask Milta to share a bit about the model of member care. I don't know if you want to ask how many are familiar with it.
How many of you are familiar with the model? Okay.
Yeah.
Just get a little closer to you.
Okay. Yeah? No. No. Yeah, there.
There it is.
There you go. Okay.
There you go.
The member care model was drawn out probably a decade ago by Ruth Van Rankin and Dave Pollock. And it's an excellent model. I find it to be very, very helpful. And so with your handout, we'll go through some of the areas. The diagram doesn't fully explain the model in the sense that all of the circles, all the lines should flow into the other sectors of member care. But what is very obvious is that master care is in the center. And after the talk that we had last night regarding our own wellness and our own spiritual strength, this fits really well. And even in times of crisis, it really is that inner strength that we get from the Lord that make all the difference. And so master care is care from and care for the master. It's the heart of member care. So it not only looks like it's the core, but it's really the heart of member care. So that is our heart, is to show that we really love one another. And our ethos, of course, is that the worker is indispensable. We heard, different things being said, in the skip in Laura May's time today. It was funny, like we paid for this house, but now we might have to buy another one. And so it becomes about money very often, and it really is not that. Like Teresa said, it's a person's call, and it's how well that person is functioning on the field, and so forth. And so a renewing relationship with the Lord is essential, and our identity should be found in Christ. And you will see, I noticed going down to the dining room, there's a plaque on the wall, and one of the core values of Bethany is to be all in. And you may have taken a look at that. I think it's a blue, and there's students' names on there where they sign that they're all in to what God has for them. And so we're really trying to emphasize that you should know your call from the Lord and follow that call and really get close to Him when you're in school here and outside as well. I found it very interesting when they put verses for Master Care, that it was the actual verses when I came off the field in 93 that God gave me. I did teach 18 years, taught missionary kids in Brazil, and our family lived there for that amount of time. 2 of our sons born there. And our daughters, of course, just regular Americans, but everybody's a DCK. And so it's Colossians 3, as it cites there in your handout, 12 through 14. Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with each other and forgive whatever grievances you may have against one another. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. And I think that phrase there really sticks in our minds. And over all of the above virtues, put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity. And so as much as we can have differences, we come from different parts of the country, we work in a cross-cultural setting, there can be so many misunderstandings. These verses really spurred me on to my own learning in member care. And so it's kind of such a privilege to be involved in this ministry. The next one is the self-care. And before anyone goes overseas, we ask them to do a self-care plan. And that self-care plan has some very obvious parts to it. For example, how will you sustain yourself spiritually? How will you remain healthy? How will you reach out into the community so that you're making friends? And so we want the missionaries to have a strong community out in the field as well as back here at home, which certainly involves you who work in churches. So we'll talk more about that. The handout, Love One Another's, is it was one of our grads that actually typed that up. I should have him retype it because it needs an update. I think I'll email it to him and see if he'll do it. But anyway, he decided to type it up, and I have distributed that to so many people here on campus. And some of the workers down, even in the garage, they will say, will you please send that to us? And so they'll talk about it in their devotions and meditate on it. And it's been such a blessing for me to see this in the Word, so many one another's. You have to pull them out to really see the categories and so forth. And so the self-care is so essential. If our health goes down, if there's something happens that we cannot work, the ministry will come to a halt unless you have a wide team that can carry that on. And then, of course, the one another's are really what we call peer care. And so there is peer counseling, there's peer care. And I think the one another's, as far as helping one another, definitely that is peer care, and it's so essential. On down to the center care, and of course that involves us, doesn't it? It involves the agency as well as the churches. And we really have some good partnerships with churches, particularly one that one of our missionaries who was in France for many years works in that ministry right now. And so the blessing for us is that he will, if we have candidates from their church, he will come into our office and tell what the church is doing to equip the candidates for overseas work. And then we'll tell him, what aspect we're working on in their lives. And so it's a partnership. And so really our desire is to create more and more of these partnerships. John Peterson, you may have met him here, that's his responsibility in our office. And we're looking forward to really partnering with churches so that our people can have good care and we're not stacking up certain areas of care and not attending to others. Sender care is the sustainer of the missionary work. And so when you're on a missions board or you're interested in being a partner with a missionary, whether it's financial or prayer or whatever it might be, you will help sustain that ministry and that person, that family on the field. It's an amazing thing. On down to looking at areas where particularly people are vulnerable, and I think you probably know these very well, is if the person has for some reason to come off the field. And one of the big reasons we face was so shocking to missionaries if they lose a visa. It's like they have prepared for years. They have been called to this place. And all of a sudden, particularly in Central Asia, they lose the visa. And not only that, they have to pay to leave the country. And so interesting, when you get the missionary, they look like they have been through severe traumatic shock. And they wonder, what is next? And so those turn out to be some of the biggest stressors at this point in time with foreign workers. We do have a good number of people that are second vocational people that are applying to the mission even to come into candidacy this June. And so they're so interesting because they come with a lot of skills, a lot of life experience, strong people. However, very often they can be in that sandwich generation where they have parents that are older and then they have children that are in college. And so that's a unique group. They need different kinds of care. They even need different regulations on them. I think when they come into the mission, we say, okay, you can do a furlough every year to check in with your relatives and so forth. Other people, it's a 2-year commitment or a bit longer. Then the organization staff is an important resource. And so in our office, we have Bethany Global Teams. Those people have been missionaries long-term. And most of us have also been long-term overseas. And so our staff is a great resource. And we do try to really care for one another. Just thinking about if we have a strict schedule, for example, interviewing students and so forth, and Teresa's so good about that and said, well, you will take the next day off or whatever. So she's very caring about that. And then the specialist care is so very important. For example, if you have a worker in Central Asia, if that person had or that family had a medical need, what's available? Would that person have to be put in another country, like go to, for example, if they need an exam, if you thought that it was something serious, would they have to go to London? Because there is a health organization there, Member Care. Would they have to go to Austria? Those kinds of things are so important. And what happens is things happen sooner or later in our own families. And so we've had experience with that, with those in Central Asia. I did not know all the details of those missionaries, but one of them just happened to mention that when you went in to see the doctor, he would Google your symptoms and then give you a prescription. And I'm like, oh, why did I ask these questions? That was crazy. Even counseling resources. If something happened that was very traumatic, where are the member care sites for counseling? And you can get those. For example, Marion Nell and Brett Lindquist and some of these people have lists of care globally. And so that's so awesome that that's possible. Specialist care, I would just highlight one or two of those. I'm thinking as far as for us to be involved, we can be very, very specialized. If we do continued study and study trauma care, our child safety, or some of these areas that are so very important, and we're trying to do that with different staff people in our office, so that we're not getting necessarily the same training, but we're just moving forward to broaden the kinds of training. That would be so interesting as some of you who are working with churches, if you would be interested in that. Or if you have a policeman come and talk to your board about security and safety, bring in the expert. It would be very available, I'm sure. And so just various things there's so many opportunities globally to be trained in member care and aspects of it. For example, one of the biggest training sites is Chiang Mai in Asia, in Thailand. And they have member care seminars there at least once a year. You can go for 4 weeks and take member care. So you could decide that maybe one of your workers is a wonderful member care person, but they need more training. They could do that. Another wonderful ministry is Thrive, and that's for women. And they have retreats across the globe, including the U.S. And there is a flyer back there on Thrive. And the retreat is free. You have to get there yourself, but the retreat is free. And they will, it's worship and spiritual, praying over the missionary women. We've had a dozen missionary women attend across the globe. And then we had the director of Thrive come to the campus this summer. Amazing woman. And so that ministry is just awesome. Our people will write back and say, oh my goodness, you know, I got my nails, I got my hair done. And women with women, it's very, very helpful, isn't it? So the network care is so very important. I think I'll leave off with that right now. Oh, I just want to say one more thing, is that I did write to Ron Koteski that has all this information. And I said, what are the top 3 things that missionaries need? And those are the top 3 things: communication, support, and re-entry details.
Thanks, Milta. I'm going to talk a little bit about communication. I may not cover everything on this slide, but I think some of it's quite self-explanatory. But certainly the communication that takes place between the missionary and their church, their sending organization, their family and friends, we want people to stay connected, and we want to stay connected with them. In today's day and age, there's a lot of great tools that really help this. Some of the things up there are listed. You know, Skype. Skype's a great tool. My daughter served a 4-month term in Afghanistan, and I could be driving down the road and get a phone call, and the line seemed like it was dead. But if I waited up to 20 or 30 seconds, all of a sudden there's her voice, you know, halfway around the world, you know, out in the middle, well, not quite nowhere. But, and we could have these conversations. And it was a lifeline to her and to me as a mom as well, you know. When you raise your kids on the field, you kind of set the pace that some of your kids are at least going to be doing some terms out on the field, whether short-term or long-term. And so I got to experience actually what my own parents got to experience when I took kids overseas. Facebook, it's a great tool. What you run into, though, is depending where the missionary is serving, they may or may not be able to use something like Facebook. A lot of places in the world you just can't put stuff out there. And so be careful. If you have a missionary in your church that is doing Facebook, but they're working in a place that they cannot overtly talk about what they're doing, you know, ask them about the food, ask them about the weather. Just talk about those kinds of things and find another means of communicating, and make sure people in your church, if they're on Facebook with them, that they understand security can be very important. And not everyone is in that situation, but some people will be. WhatsApp can be a great tool. My daughter was 2 years working in Brazil with her husband, who's also from Brazil. And we set up a group for our family in WhatsApp, and we just had this kind of a family journal, I called it, because Sometimes it was a picture of what one of our kids somewhere in the world is making for dinner. And there's comments, or there's little video clips of the kids, or little audio clips. Someone's birthday, everybody in the family puts a short little audio message. Within our churches, we can do those kinds of things as well, where you can be communicating, and sometimes those short little pieces of communication can really be so important. Yammer I'll refer to in a few more minutes, but that's a tool that we use now. It's similar to a Facebook thing, but it's a closed group. And so we have with our missionaries that we have a closed group as an organization that just our missionaries and us are in. And so I guess I'll go ahead and share about it now. So that's an opportunity then they can put ministry news. When there's a new baby born, when it's someone's birthday, we're putting messages out there. But there's also other groups within there. We have a member care group in there where people can get information about member care or let needs be made known to the member care team. We have an Unreached Peoples group where one of our people that works in Mexico, he posts different articles and things to challenge all of us in working with unreached people groups. There's a group that does strategizing. There's a resource group where people can post resources that are helpful to them on the field. And then it's similar to Facebook. You go into that group and you find what you need, you make comments. And we're trying to build community and connection, not just from the organization to our missionaries, but missionary to missionary, so that they then can connect no matter where they are in the world. We also use different assessments. The word up there that says Elam, that's just an annual assessment that we designed several years ago for our missionaries. And it just basically looks at several areas of their life very holistically again and asks, how are you doing in those? Asks for their feedback. And then we have someone on the field, if we have somebody present that can do it. Otherwise, someone like Milta or myself or others in the office walk through it with them. But it's also an opportunity for them to feed back to the organization, like, how are we doing? What do you need from us? And so it's making an intentionality of that. And that sometimes helps us realize needs people have before they go into any sort of a crisis mode for those things. The Cerny Smith is a cultural stress tool, but it also assesses other areas of stress in your life. It's a great tool, and it's something that we, as an organization, we haven't started using it yet, but we're hopeful this will be the year, because we process, especially with our interns going out from the university here, we process a lot of people, and we just have to have some tools that help us just take an objective look at how is this person doing. And so we can ask the same questions to everyone. I'll mention, too, that it refers to the woman-to-woman program. And one of the things we launched this year was we had a volunteer who helped us launch it. But basically it's for all the women in our organization. And we're trying to work that we have another woman who has been on the field herself. Sometimes, hopefully, another Bethany missionary in the past, but really, who are people who've been on the field who might understand what those women are going through? And then just ask that as each woman takes 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 women on the field, that every month they have a connect. So it's not an organizational communication to them, but it's really a personal relational communication. How are you doing? And that can be done, through text, through email, through a phone call, but then really asking them maybe every few months, make sure to have a Skype call. And Skype, like I said, it's a great tool, but I also find for some of our missionaries, their schedules are as busy as ours are here. And sometimes they'll be like, we just really don't have time to Skype. And that's where sometimes the texting, the WhatsApp, those short little bursts of a message, I sometimes will write missionaries because my schedule gets busy too, and I'll sometimes just write 3 or 4 sentences. I'm praying for you today. How are you doing? I read your newsletter. Glad to hear this news. And those are usually the messages I get a response to, like, wow, thanks for thinking of me. And so that's where sometimes even those short, simple communications can be so effective. One of the things I always remind missionaries of, though, is let your needs be made known. We're supposed to let our needs be made known to God, and I say, boy, if God asks you to, how much more us as people, we need you to communicate. And we understand some needs are big and difficult to talk about or overwhelming or whatever it might be. But as much as possible, when you experience a small need, let us know. We'll work with you and see what we can do to take care of that need. And there again, working to be as proactive as we can be. And along with this, with communication, I would say too, to really practice good active listening with people. When we talk with them, ask really good questions. Questions that are open-ended, not yes and no. How are you doing? Fine. Well, ask questions where they can respond, and then sit back and give them time to respond. And several years ago, when I was earlier on in ministry of doing debrief with missionaries, I sat and talked with a couple who were working in a very difficult place. And as our time was coming to a close, I think it must have been the Holy Spirit speaking to me, and I just said, is there anything else? And it seemed like everything was fine. And I said, is there anything else? And the fact that we'd sat and met for, I don't even know, an hour, hour and a half, whatever it had been, the fact that there was good, safe communication, that they could, they were being listened to and being heard and empathized with or whatever. And when I said, is there anything else? All of a sudden, a big need they had came out. And then we were able to say, okay, let's talk about this. Let's see what kind of support we can provide to you in this situation. And I just thought later, wow, if I would not have asked that question to this day, I might not know. And so I've used that quite regularly in debrief, is give people time to talk. And then just very, not too probing and not too, nonchalant, but just say, is there anything else? Is there anything else you want to share? Is there anything else you're going through that we can help you with? And it's surprising how many times that's when the real needs come out. The other need after the communication was support. And just touching on community a little bit, community is a feeling of fellowship with others, sharing common goals and interests. And just the importance of community. And I've shared about us using online tools that help our missionaries have community with one another and back with us here at the home office. But we want missionaries to be connected with their home church and with the sending organization. We want them to know that we care. We want them to know that we're here for them. And so we want to do whatever things we can do to build community. Each year we have an annual missionary retreat, usually in the middle of June. And as many of our people as are home on furlough at that time, we try to have them come. We do a kids program and just keep their kids real busy so the parents can just sit and have time with one another, have time for debrief, have time just catching up on what's going on in our organization, have time to just worship and be in the Word together. And that's really been a great thing to do. And that's something, actually one of our partner churches, and probably more than one, but one specifically that had talked with us about what they did. And they'll take time, and we try to as well, take time to do something fun with your people, whatever that might be. Last year we played Minute to Win It with all our missionaries, and we were just in the dining room doing all this crazy stuff, our staff and our missionaries, all making fools of ourselves. But the thing that did is it leveled the playing field. So it wasn't newer or younger missionaries. There wasn't any differences there, because sometimes the older missionaries were better than the younger ones at some of the activities. It wasn't always the most athletic. And it was our staff. It was us being real people together, being crazy. And that's what lets people know, wow, you really do care. One other thing that we do, Milta is in charge of doing this, and that's to send birthday cards out. And we send out these birthday cards, and oftentimes we send them to all the kids, all the adults. And the kids' ones, I don't know if you still do it, but she would put like packages of Kool-Aid or put a couple balloons in there, or sometimes a Pop Rocks or gum, whatever is skinny and fits in there, and it doesn't even cost anything extra. And some of those missionary kids, actually, some of them, they're coming now, since Milta's been doing this job several years now. Some of them are starting to come to our university, and they're planning to be missionaries. And I think some of it actually goes from some of those little things that you do, that they feel a part of the organization. They feel cared for. They feel like they have value. You care about them, not just their parents. And so the things that you can find to show your kid, they're your kids too, that you really care. And Neil Perullo, in his book, Serving as Senders, one of the areas of support that he talks about is moral support. And I like how he says it, and I don't know if this is quite an exact quote, but basically he says that moral support is telling your missionaries, we're here for you, what can we do? And I think that's the bottom line. If you don't know what else to do with your missionaries, just say, we're here for you, what can we do? And then make sure that the things they say that you can do for them, you maybe can't do all of them, or you can't do it how they would want, but do as much of it as what you can. And then they will really know how much you really do care about them. And couple other areas is expectations. A lot of times when we deal with conflict between our missionaries and within their teams and things, oftentimes it comes down to the area of expectations. And it's important that we know, what do our missionaries expect from us? But they also need to know, what do we expect from them? And along with that, I would say that when they have a sending organization, apart from their sending and supporting churches, what ends up happening is sometimes those churches are doing a great job, but they have annual assessments and they have other things that they expect of the missionaries. Well, if the sending organization is doing that too, it can be a real heavy burden on those missionaries. So what we've actually done is we've had sending churches say, hey, we do this annual assessment. And we say, oh, we do one too. And then we look at each other's and say, hey, yours looks good, or yours looks good, or let's have them do this page and not these pages, and try and simplify it for the missionary. Where we as the church and we as the sending organization, we're going to be the ones that figure this out so that we don't create an unnecessary burden upon those missionaries. And and there's so many other things. Milt already mentioned the self-care plan, but there's just so many various logistical needs that they have. And it's going to vary with each one based on where they're going. But, find out what some of those needs are. And then within your church, one of the wonderful things with sending churches and supporting churches is you've got people. As a sending organization, we have a limited size of staff. But I think of within churches, just the large body of people, the number of people, the gifts that people have, their desire to be involved. And so how you can involve people so that those missionaries really know just how much you care for them. There's so many possibilities there.
One of the books back there talks about Pack to Go, and it's written by a couple who have been 35 years in experience. And my husband and I do have several churches supporting us, and I'm on the missions board at our church. And yet, I do know that the missions board is supporting other missionaries, some in Turkey, all over the world, and we're more local. And I love the idea of Pack to Go. And what that is, it's an additional team. It's more like a self-care plan for the worker. And I would say that this kind of started a while ago, because it's been a long time since my husband and I have been out of college. Believe me, it's been decades. But when some agencies are encouraging their missionaries to do a Pack to Go, and who is on the Pack to Go? There are people who are honest, or you can be honest with, people that you can be vulnerable with. They're real. You've known them for quite a while. And so they aren't exactly accountability partners, but they're similar. And so if something were happening on the field, it wouldn't impact your work. It doesn't impact anything, your ministry, as far as your ministry description or anything like that. So it doesn't interfere with what the church would have you do overseas and what an agency would have you do overseas. But it does bring more people into the missionary family's life, so that they're accountable. And I would just like to list a few people. Interesting is my husband has about 3 of his fraternity brothers way back in the 60s. And as it turns out, they are supporters. One hasn't been a supporter very long, but they are supporters. And so what's happened fairly recently is that one of them will call, and he'll say, how are you doing? And of course, men say, fine. Well, not my husband, he's a teacher. But anyway, they'll stay on the phone and go over every part of life. And it turns out that he is a lawyer. And so he's interested in, what is happening in your life with respect to, your finances and all kinds of things like that. More the technical, but like it's a lifelong friendship. And so then another one will call, and he's a retired doctor. And so it's kind of like the same thing. They're going over. And then there is just a sweetheart of a woman who is in a Methodist church. She's on the missions board, and she actually was friends with Ed's parents, who have been in heaven now for, more than a decade. And yet she's never forgotten us. And she decided that she wants her check to go directly to us. And so the only reason, at first I was like, why? Why would you do that? But the only reason is because she wants to write to us once a month. And she wants me to write to her once a month. And it is amazing when you see that envelope, a different sticker on it every time, of course. It's like it just touches you in a way. And so the Pack to Go group, I think people that are going out should be encouraged, whether they have been out for a while and they want to have a group like that. But just some, people that you can really call. And you can think of people that you're really close to. And maybe they would be, they would like to be on that list where, they're honest, you can be vulnerable with them. They are involved in your ministry, but they're going to be more involved because they're going to know, like Teresa said, more and more communication from you. And so I love that. And take a look if you're interested in that. Now, one of the big things with the church is re-entry of the missionaries, right? So we think, okay, missionaries are coming back, or we're going to do a missionary get-together in the fall, or I don't know if yours is in the spring. But what are the needs that missionaries have? And of course, we usually think of the common ones. For example, a car. And they probably need a place to stay and so forth. And so I did ask one of my colleagues that is on a team. She's actually on a team to welcome missionaries coming back. And that team cares for the missionaries' basic needs. Where they're going to stay, they'll fill the refrigerator, that kind of thing. And she said there are a few things that are really interesting and they're really essential. For example, a family returning from the field, even if it's for a home assignment or more permanently, be really important that they have their own place to stay. Even if they have family here in the cities, they're coming back to this location, it's not the same because it'll put like 3 generations in the one house, and the kids, of course, haven't seen the grandparents for a while. Kids are developing in ways that probably you and I didn't, and so there are differences that can happen on how to raise the children. And so she said it's very important that if at all possible that they have their own place to stay. And then we know once they get settled a bit, usually we like to have it 6 weeks after they've come off the field, is to debrief their experience. And by debrief their experience means that would be the first time that Teresa and I would meet. Teresa would meet with the missionaries because of our organization for BIM. And then I meet with them because of their more personal needs with their children, medical needs, and so forth. And thinking about who is in your congregation, it is so wonderful when you have a medical doctor or you have nurses, you have people like that that are in your congregation. They actually could meet with the families and see what their medical needs are, or just questions that they have. During home assignment, like Teresa alluded to, I'll just take, for example, one family from Azerbaijan with 4 children. So they had met with Teresa, and then the parents came into my office, and so we were talking. And so as it turns out, they came off the field in the winter part of Azerbaijan, and the kids had been sick with colds for 2 months, all 4 of them. And so I'm sitting there, I'm trying to watch my body language, it's calm, just listening to all of this, and the concern that they had, and letting them share their story. And so I thought, wow, what can I do here? This sounds to me like they need medical care right away. And so as it turns out, in St. Paul, there's a doctor who's a Christian. He has his own practice, and one of our former staff members works in that. She's a nurse. So I called her, and in 6 hours, the entire family was in there for checkups. And sure enough, children needed to be on antibiotic. And so when you have people in your congregation who would be willing to do things like that, if there's that really was an emergency waiting to happen. So I would encourage you to put that before your congregation. And what about counseling? Do you have someone in your church that is a counselor that can work with children and so forth? Because if there's a need, then you can get that result sooner than you can, rather than waiting and finding someone else. Children's education is a big one. Even with all the homeschooling, I notice a lot of the students that apply to college here have been homeschooled and then gone into a public school at a certain time. And so when the family is at those stages of children going into high school, very often they can decide, wow, or when a child is going into college, we have a couple coming from China, and their child is going to do one more year at an international school where her dad works, and then she's coming to the U.S. For her studies. And so you hear what they say, right? We don't know what we'll do. So you're thinking, wow, are you going to transition off? What's going to happen? So as they come this summer, we'll be really listening, not asking a whole lot of questions, but really, really listening. And children's education is so very important, as you know. And we have one, I'm sure you know about this, the Compass House in Florida. So interesting. This young man, his dad is American and his mother is Brazilian. And he went to the school that I taught at, which now is bilingual. However, his English didn't have that much practice sitting on a campus with all Brazilian students except him. And so Compass House accepted him to come up, and the schedule, he's been up there for a whole year, and he's now returning to Compass House. But the schedule is in the morning, you study English with one of the missionaries who's a teacher, been teaching overseas for years, and now this is her ministry. And in the afternoon, you work. So you're working and you're learning the value of money and life, adult things. And so then you have your $200 to pay Compass House a month. But you're with other missionary kids. And so there it is. It's in Florida. It's a wonderful facility. There's all kinds of options. So we just have to make sure that we can know what we need. What effective things can be done in churches? Do any of you have something that you have really noticed that you're doing and has really given amazing results with your workers?
We are utilizing the care teams from Neil Carollo and finding it really builds relationship between our ministry partner, we call them, and a select group of people in the church. You can really get to know them and feel like you're a part. So it's not just resting on the committee, missions committee.
Yes.
It's going down to the church people who say, I've got a part and I can do it. So we love that approach.
That's a really good approach, whether you do it like this or what you said, because my friend said it is so important that these people are not on the missions committee, because the missions committee is there for other purposes. And so I've noticed that in my missions committee, because it used to be that each person had a missionary couple. And I came late, so I didn't get anybody, right? But I have for here. And I've just noticed, and I will bring it up, I'm not hearing about what's happening with our missionaries. It just seems like, you have other responsibilities. And so lots of times it's a budget issue and on and on and on, right? And the church is going through things. So excellent. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah.
Our church had a parsonage, and then staying there, so instead of selling it, we made it into a missionary house.
Oh, that's
wonderful. So when they're home, there's a space for them, or if someone is just in for a short amount of time, it's worked out really well.
Oh, that's wonderful. When it's vacant, could you let us know? Okay, go ahead.
One lady in our church, on her own initiative, when the missionary family was in town, just told the family, look, keep your Thursday afternoon open and took then their age kids to the zoo. Just let them enjoy time at the zoo together. So.
Yeah, that reminds me of a story on one of our furloughs from the Philippines. We were down in New Mexico, where my husband's from, and we went to the fair with our kids, but we literally really didn't have enough money. I think we had enough money they could go on 1 or 2 rides. It was very limited. We had quite a limited budget then. And we ran into one of the church members who knew us, and he was involved with missionaries himself. And he said, "Oh, your kids must need to go on some rides." And he gave us money, and they got to go on some more rides. And that was huge. But, it was like the Lord brought him there that day at the same time. But what a blessing to our kids. It really showed them that God cared about them as missionary kids, not just about mom and dad. Yeah.
Well, what effective things can churches do? My friend cautioned me, for example, and our church did this too. We just said, we would like to have a short-term team go to, in this case it was Mexico. And so we even scouted it out, and I didn't participate in that because, the time I had been in the church. But it was really interesting is that the trip, several families went on it. They took the entire family. So that part was huge. But when everybody came back, I could tell that the missions committee wasn't all in with the results. And they just felt like, wow, we didn't do significant ministry. We wanted to be working with the Mexicans and so forth, And so we can have our own idea, and we can think, let's just, here we have these missionaries, and let's just take a team now. And yet, do we speak the language? For example, we had a relationship with a Brazilian church, and a lot of our people went down to teach English, but none of them spoke Portuguese. And so when Ed and I were back in Brazil for conferences, we went down, and the woman, I greeted her in Portuguese, and she just melted, the pastor's wife. She melted, and walked right up and just hugged me, and she said, none of the others spoke Portuguese. We just couldn't really relate. And so be sure to ask the missionary what would be appropriate, because you are going to hit the language barrier, the cultural barrier. What about Bethany Global Teams is a short-term mission sending part of our, and I'm not plugging that, but I'm just using Turkey as an example, is that so many people are really interested in that area of the world. So what Bethany Global Teams does is take short-term trips that it's culture and prayer walking. And it's amazing. All ages sign up for that trip. So, you do have to ask the missionary and say, what would be helpful to you? Go ahead.
Another thing that you can ask the members of the church, if anybody has an old band that they want to get rid of, and if there's someone in your church that likes to fix things up, but our church keeps a couple of old bands around, and so when the missionaries come home, there's always a vehicle for them to use while they're here, and then fix it up a little bit when they leave it the next time.
Yeah. And just thinking about Bethany years ago, for example, we were sitting out near Paraguay, in Bethany's oldest mission place. And so what happened was you can be in the same country and with your colleagues and have no idea what they need. And so couples had moved to Sao Paulo to start the bookstore. And we had no idea what was happening, but Bethany here got a cry saying, we don't really have right electrical wiring in this huge house. Now that's probably not a surprise. And we have paid two people to come in and wire the house, and they have left to buy supplies and never returned. And so please, help. And so, one of our missionaries was sent over there, and he stayed about 2 months and wired the house. And so we could be involved like that. For example, we could ask the missionary, what do you need? Well, we have a project here that needs your expertise. And I know that a church in Wisconsin has done that for Kenya many times, since they've sent a couple of men that could finish that task, and then they went back to the church, adult men such as yourself. So it's pretty amazing. There are a lot of needs, and when you don't have essential needs met, it's very impacting. Yeah. Emotionally and then on your work. Yeah. Okay.
I think our time is up. Should I close with a word of prayer here? Let's pray then. Father, thank you so much that you care about each one of these people on the front lines. You care about each and every missionary, about every family, every child, every adult. Lord, we want to be people, we want to be churches and organizations that send out people healthy, that stand by them and serve them and care about them so that they can remain healthy and effective for the things you're calling them to do. I do just pray for each person, each church and organization represented here today. Just ask, Lord, that you will give all the wisdom and discernment that we need. Pray that you will help us to have the resources needed, that we can care for many of the needs that our people have. And Father, we pray above all that no matter what happens on the field day in and day out, that they'll know that they're not alone, that they'll know that you are with them, and so are we. And so we just commit each and every one of them represented today into your hands and just pray your safekeeping over them. And Lord, the needs that they have that are not met, the things that they have that are maybe not even voiced, Lord, would you just meet with them and take care of them today, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen.
We have one last session back over in the church.